Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, both in person and online. For those I haven't met, my name is Hayatun Salim, and I have the honour of being the chair of judges for the St Andrews Prize for the Environment. And we're just about to enjoy one of the highlights of the St Andrews Prize final programme, which is, of course, the opportunity to hear from the previous year's winner. I'm sure that many, if not all of you, are well aware that last year we were delighted to award the prize to Snowchange Cooperative for their Landscape Rewilding Programme. Originally founded in 2000, Snowchange Cooperative is a network of Indigenous and local communities working on cultural, environmental and science issues. They primarily support programmes in the Boreal and the Arctic to advance Indigenous cultural issues and well-being, rewilding and ecosystem restoration, and landscape-scale restoration of community lands. Using Indigenous and traditional knowledge alongside the latest science and research, their Landscape Rewilding Programme rebuilds communities and Indigenous relevant lands, forests and waters into biodiversity hotspots, carbon sinks, carbon stores and healthy environments. And it was this immensely powerful approach which blends a deep and nuanced understanding of Indigenous knowledge and rigorous science, which we, the judges, found so inspiring last year and which really led to us awarding the prize to Snowchange Cooperative. And it's an approach that we really believe has the potential to drive systemic change and impact at scale for climate and communities, which is, of course, the very essence of the prize itself. So it's my great pleasure to welcome to the lectern Tero Mustonen, the President of Snowchange. Tero, the floor is yours.
Dear friends and staff of the university, what a pleasure to stand in front of you. And the greatest pleasure is to say that the winner for this year is, this will come. I know the pain. A year ago, Kaisu, my wife who is traveling with me, and all of our staff were exactly in your position, this year's finalists. So I thank you for your work. I thank the university and the award for allowing us to finally meet. And I also want to recognize Principal Memstone for having us here and all of the people involved at the prize itself. I'll try to position some of the work that we do and give you a northern view. When we think about the organizations and the past 22, 23 years of the award, most of your winners before us are all from the global south or some of the tropical regions. And as the whale will show you, we will try to give you a lot of cold showers and freezing temperatures. A very quick introduction. I'm a fisherman, and sometimes when I have the time, I also conduct scientific studies, but my primary work in the cooperative is to lead our fishermen. Incidentally, I also then worked as the lead author for the IPCC. So it's kind of a two hats that the organization tries to do. We do, as we heard just now, directly support a lot of the Boreal and Arctic organizations, communities and peoples, and then also try to scribble the results of the past almost quarter of a century into scientific journals, assessments, and so on. And the combination of these two factors tries to advance and create something new. What a year it has been. I picked out a few key events that mattered. When we last met you online a year ago, there was no war in Europe. We are living with Kaisu 40 kilometers or about 45 kilometers from the Russian border. The country that was next to us was rather peaceful. Families were going back and forth over the border, and now a lot of these events are in the past. We don't know what the future will be. but we do know that this has had a massive significant result both for the organization. All of our Siberia work has been discontinued. Personally, I have been caretaking regarding the safety and coordination of our staff in Russia so that they will not come to harm's way, and also all the critically important links to indigenous and local communities in Russia have been cut. We have seen two COPs, 26 and 27, the one just ended now in Egypt, and I also wanted to bring something that matters to our scientific partners, which was the massive seamount explosion in Tonga, January 2022. In fact, this was something called mesospheric event. It was one of the largest single explosions in recorded history and caused death events in Tonga, but also points to an Earth that's really changing and having dynamic events underway. And of course, COVID continued to play a role. I'll start my overview of the year and the things of how the prize mattered and what are the points of relevance by delivering to you the frozen north, or maybe I should say previously frozen north. I stole some of these slides from my colleagues at NOAA, with whom we are partnering in the US, to give you some of the very quick overview of critically important changes going on in the Arctic. We are in Scotland in the Pictish lands. In fact, Monk Regulus saw this place in a dream and thought that I'll bring the remnants of St. Andrews here to the edge of the known world. However, it's in some ways the Arctic that has been the unknown world for many centuries. And one of the most important and iconic characteristics of the North has been, of course, the frozen seas, the snow belt, the distinct cultures that have come up with a high society, customary law, and ways of life associated with snow and ice. These maps will show you that the Arctic is no more the same as it used to be. The most important indicator for the changes underway, which is of course the sea ice, is rapidly decreasing. If we look at the 1979 view and then come back to early 2010s, we know that roughly millions of square kilometers of the minimum extent have been lost. The same is true for the maximum, i.e. springtime of the availability of sea ice. Why does this matter for the whole planet? Unfortunately, or fortunately, sea ice is critically important for keeping us cool. We just went into COP27 in Egypt by thinking, how can we keep it down to 1.5 or failing or succeeding, depending on the viewpoint. However, there's nothing more important as a coolant for the whole planetary system as the poles. The sea ice, the bright white that's reflecting majority of the incoming sunlight and kind of absorbing only a fraction of the heat that an open ocean would be. And now, as we are entering into the century of losing this sea ice, it will be the ocean, a darker surface, that's sucking up all the sunlight and warming further everything. So unfortunately, despite the fact that we come from the Boreal and the Arctic with our messages, you will not be saved from the changes that are underway up north. They are directly in front of your face now that we are by the ocean here. Anything that's going on is directly going to be affecting all of us, Costa Rica, India, and all of the rainforests, as well as Scotland. So that's why, in order to get to an understanding of what we do and why we do things in Snowchange, we wanted to give you a sense of why the Arctic and the polar areas matter, in this case, the oceans at first. It's also the fact that even a small, tiny temperature change in the Arctic will start to cascade through the system. We have heard from the work of, for example, the likes of Johan Rockström, Sir David King here, and others that have been saying that the events underway in the snow belt and Arctic Circle can be seen as tipping points. When a number of tipping points is reached, I think there are 14 globally, we are in an uncontrollable cascade of events never been seen before. We are heading to a planet, and in this case, humanity will have a new ocean in the lifespan of our time, or in our lifespan, we will face mostly open ocean in the Arctic parts of the planet. The second part, what's going on the land? What's going on in the northern lands and terrestrial ecosystems? This is a drone footage or an image that was taken by our Inuit teams in Bering Sea coast in a community of Unalakleet on the Bering Sea. It's a large slump of melting permafrost. These are also going on. These are the physical landscape changes that are right now greening the Arctic, melting the permafrost event, expanding a lot of species, we call it species on the move, from the temperate and southern regions into the Arctic, replacing and changing food webs, endemic species that have been adapting to the sea ice, to the cold conditions, for example, Arctic fox, and so on and so on. So both the Arctic lands and the ocean are now undergoing a change which is very hard to fathom or put into the context. Just a quick overview of our work. I hope there are no opponents of seal hunt in the crowd. This is a view of the work that we have been doing in Alaska with Unalakleet and the hunters from the Inupiaq people who are critically depending on the marine environment for food security. Let's stop here for a second. We know that the hunt triggers a lot of opinions. For example, in the Faroes, when they are harvesting the pilot whale, there are a lot of environmental groups, there are many NGOs that come and make their statements about the traditional hunt. When we think of the past Arctic encounters or even conflict between the environmental organizations and the indigenous communities, the seal hunt and furthermore the ban on seal skins devastated many indigenous communities because of the remoteness. These are all fly-in communities, and when you think of the economic options the Inuits, for example, have, if you take away the only viable source of funding and primary cash economy, which was in many ways for the past 40 years the seal hunt, you face a circle of devastation. So, social security dependency, abuse, and unemployment, and for the lack of better word, lack of self-esteem. And if you turn this the other way, the hunt in the north is very different than in many other parts. It's a people's hunt. It's a food security hunt. It's been building on centuries, in some cases for thousands of years, of close, extremely intricate relationship between the marine mammals, the caribou, and in this case, for example, the seal and the people. For the lack of better term, the Arctic hunting societies, especially the indigenous societies, when they were able to exercise their own governance, their customary law, and life, for the lack of better term, had a profound communion with the earth. They had a profound understanding of how humans and nature are to live together. It wasn't always paradise or some noble savage endless harmony. Of course, overhunts sometimes took place, but there was checks and balances to deal with that. There was sharing mechanisms to make sure no one is left behind, and a constant watch on the natural resources and the environment. That's extremely crucial as a lesson for sustainability today. On the left-hand side, I brought a graph that's done by one of our ecologists, Pre-One Dam. And the point that I want to show you is in 1975, 1974. The mean temperature starts to rapidly change in Alaska beyond 1974. One of the elders that I worked with, and guys was there too, in early 2000s was called Stanton Kachetak. He was at that time one of the oldest, or actually the oldest elder in the village of Unalakleet. And in the oral history work that we were doing to try to understand with them and on the invitation of the tribal council how Bering Sea and Alaska is changing, Stanton was sharing that, you know, as a kind of a observation that I made in 1972, 1973, the ocean started to be different. It became strange because it was so warm. I started to notice that the water temperature and also the air temperature is different. And then we started to observe and monitor and started to understand that things are fundamentally changing. So Stanton was able to pick up this change. And then when we look at the science graph, it almost one-to-one corresponds with their observations. So sometimes we get to be asked, when did you know? When did you hear? When did the Arctic people know what's going to happen? And I wanted to bring you one of these examples from Unalakleet to illustrate that the science confirms what Stanton was saying based on his observation that things were becoming very different already in 1972. So what did we do for the past 50 years to lose this momentum? Why was Stanton's observations not taken seriously in time? When Jim Hansen went to the Senate in 1980s and said things will be extremely complex and this will become a threat to global society, meaning climate change, and his studies on how the planet is changing, why was that ignored? Now that we are in the future, and I'm showing you a graph of receding sea ice, accelerating temperatures all across the Arctic, and why are we in this mess? Well, that's the task of Snowchange, and that's what we try to solve every day. When we try to position the award and the work that we do in the organization into the previous context of changing north and the planet under fire, you can say, I guess you can say that now, there are dwindling options of what to do actually to maintain climate security, maintain these communities and advance the work that needs to happen. We are coming to the notion of non-permafrost peatlands and forests. Because we do know that the sea ice is receding, the ocean is warming up extremely fast. I showed you that the permafrost is melting on land, releasing methane and many other things like mercury and so on and so on. There's nothing we can do about that. So that leaves us with a strategic window in the north, non-permafrost peatlands, and the potential, immense potential to protect them and to even in some instances restore them. Why does it matter in Finland? Finland, let's think about that. It's a Monty Python song, Finland, 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 and so on. You may have seen our Formula One drivers and others, but you may not know about our massive amounts of, I guess you can say, lost peatlands by now. Just like Scotland, we used to be a superpower of peatlands. In fact, up to 10 million hectares of natural peatlands, which were, of course, carbon sinks, flood alleviating environments, biodiversity hotspots, have been lost over the past century. Why? This is the case, has to do with the map on the right-hand side. Many of you may have the view of Finland as a kind of a, I mean, the Nordic countries have a fantastic VR program. So you may have seen how sustainable our forestry is. We have all the landscapes filled with trees, actually Scots pine, and some of the Norwegian spruce, but mostly Scots pine, of course, and so on and so on. What you don't know is that over 95% of those landscapes are devoid of life. If you think of them as monocultures, they are planted or managed forests, meaning that in 1,000 years, it starts from the time when the Pictish king was here and thinking about your life, 1080 on the upper left-hand corner, and then it ends in 2010. And you can see that all the green stuff, which is the primary natural forest in Finland, is gone. It's completely gone as an ecosystem. And the remaining old growth and natural forests in Finland, as well as peatlands, are mostly in parks. And this has caused a massive devastation in Finland. We have had most of our 188,000 lakes affected. All the salmon-rich rivers that we used to have, the trout rivers, are now brown because of the organic loading and mercury and other things that are there. I have been hearing all of this during this visit, which is very wonderful that we actually get to meet with you. The fact that not many people knew that there are traditional communities and indigenous peoples in Europe. In fact, 2 hours by flight, and then a few hundred kilometers by train, which is of course the Sami peoples. And then when I say traditional communities, I refer to the Finnish forest communities. However, due to our geographical and socio-historical context, they have no rights. They have no rights to the past century of highly extractive loss of these natural resources. Sure, they gave us benefits. Our forests, when they were taken, have given us healthcare. You know that the Nordics are leading in free education. There's the notion of the Scandinavian welfare state. Come and we'll take care of you. We are all equal, so on and so on. But what you haven't heard too often, I think, is the price for that. And the price is our peatlands and forests, which used to constitute our world. So how do we define ourselves? What's going on? What's the Landscape Rewilding Programme and Snowchange? We heard that in the introduction, the years it's been going on for almost a quarter of a century. We are combining as one of the only units in practice in the Arctic, in this part of the Arctic, indigenous knowledge with the latest science. Many of our staff, including indigenous peoples, were contributing authors to the IPCC. I was leading work for the past 5 years within the IPCC to tackle one of the most complex issues, which is how do you incorporate the memory, the knowledge and rights of indigenous peoples in the climate panel's work, because it's a government-driven system. They don't like to always hear that the people in Costa Rica or Borneo or Africa have rights that have never been ceded. And as we heard from some of the finalist presentations today, about 80% of world's remaining biodiversity is on indigenous and traditional community land. So they are doing something better than most of the global society in caretaking and protecting, even if they don't have the formal rights or mechanisms to do that. That's why we were founded, to be a northern voice, a northern mechanism, for the lack of better term, of how the villages and the actual people think about these things. And then moving on from where we are into something that corrects the century of damages that we have faced. Snowchange owns 3,100 hectares over 65 sites. Through land possessions, we are operating on positive influence of 52,000 hectares. That makes the largest land manager outside the state in Finland if you discount the forestry companies. So even within the last year, your award has been fueling a massive sea change. Now that we are on the coast, I think I shouldn't say snow change, but sea change of how communities are rising up. They are being empowered and reclaiming, if not always the ownership, but management of their landscapes. We are focusing on the Boreal and the Arctic, but we have also a Pacific program. Why? It was in early 2000s that the Maori invited us to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Afterwards, we were invited to, so we never expand, we only go and start to work if there's an invitation from a community. And then Victor Stephenson from Australia, an indigenous knowledge holder, invited us to the wet tropics to learn about what they are doing in land management. And soon Snowchange had a global program when we started from a small village, and now it became a global organization. The kind of work that the partners are doing, for example, in the Pacific, has to do with things like traditional burns, bringing fire back into the country. After 200 years of displacement, Indigenous Australians are, they have preserved the way fire is being managed. We all know of the devastating fires in Australia 2019 to 2020. Most of that had to do with fuel load. Those landscapes had not been burned traditionally. There was nobody to take care of the country. And Victor and our partner teams there, the fire sticks, are trying to nurture and burn on the good fire, cool fire, burn the undergrowth, create safety, bring back people back to the landscape after 200 years of loss. What does this all point to? Is memory. These are the peoples that are part of our linguistic reality, the Finno-Ugric peoples. You will see our place called Karelia, partly in Russia, and then on this side, so we are divided by the international border since 1944. Further up, you will see our linguistic cousins, the Sami, in 9 different indigenous linguistic groups. But they are distinctly indigenous peoples. Some of these cultures have different statuses or status based on their legal and national positions. Further into Siberia, you will see Hanti, Mansi, Mari, and many other peoples that are part of the non-Indo-European family of languages and cultures that are all about the forest and the peatlands. Our languages are the oldest spoken oral cultures in this part of the world. The oldest words in our language have to do with fire, fish, hunting dogs, wolf, and the raven, and these words are still in use. It points to either not great progress over the past 10,000 years or preservation of memory that's also uniting us, even though Finns are not indigenous peoples and we have undergone a big cultural change with many of the similar peoples around the world despite our cultural differences. There's no better symbol than this for the memory in our case. Kaisu leads the work on peatlands. Peatlands are the Finnish memory, just like they bring you good whiskey here. But I would go and venture even further that here, as well as back home, these peatlands are the best possible memory of how the old people lived, what they left behind, and what we can find in the stratified peat. To give you an example, the world's oldest fishing net has been discovered in our shores. It's 10,000 years old. The Bosnian ski that the Swedes have now stolen to become world champions and so on was founded on a peatland like this one, and proves the existence of skiing and winter travel in our shores and lands for millennia. Why do these kind of things then matter in the Arctic context? Is that every hectare of a peatland we preserve, every old growth forest hectare that we preserve keeps carbon on the ground. According to IPCC, 1/3 of world soil-based carbon remaining is with us, not only in Finland, but in the Arctic and Boreal. And if Finland is a superpower of peatlands, despite the fact of 10 million hectares being destroyed or affected, it rests on us to rise up to the challenge, just like in Amazonia, to keep that carbon on the ground and restart the carbon sinks, if they matter in scale, and they do. All of these peatlands are massive biodiversity hotspots. We have the European flyway. In fact, your lands have now our curlews. We want them back in May. But most of these waders and other migratory birds will leave your shores and they will head northeast from here to come to nest and join in the abundance of the endless summer, the endless day. In the higher Arctic in Finland, the sun doesn't go down from early May to end of July. Even in our village, it doesn't go down from mid-May until early July. So the productivity of the Arctic ecosystems, whether it's the whale from the first slide, or the birds, or the mammals, insects, is immense. It is the bonanza of the planet. Unfortunately so, the Arctic is also the last untapped area for humanity for natural resources. So despite the fact that we have a century of extractive industries that have destroyed our forests and peatlands, removed rights from indigenous and traditional villages, now it's the mining, now it's the solar panels, the wind turbines, but especially Elon Musk and his battery-driven vehicles. And therefore, this is a very complex century. 100 years ago, it was pretty clear. Divided, you can use that word. They are cutting down the timber forests, getting money out of that, and fine, that's the legacy. Now we are dealing with things like simultaneous claims by mining companies, logging company, and wind power company on the same hectare. And that's why this century is far more wicked in its problems. That's why we thank already now for the prize, because you are recognizing efforts that are navigating extremely complex landscapes. One of the things that I was thinking about when we came here, I'll go back to the peatlands, is that we are the voice of the forest. We are the voice of the peatland because it can't travel here to tell you how things are. I live with Kaisu without running water inside the last remaining 60 hectares of boreal primary forest in our village. 60 hectares, that's how low we are. And when I walk there, or Kaisu observes the European jay that's hogging up all the bird feeding stuff over the weekend, or the wolverine that walked by our mailbox about a month ago, we think we are coming now to Scotland to tell of the things that are underway in the Arctic, the largest and last remaining wildernesses or wilderness areas of Europe. How can we convey what's going on? And in that way, through our lifestyle and our culture, we try to communicate to you the primary messages from the forest, the primary songs of these wading rivers. What is the price, the monetary value of this red shank when it calls out to a female in May and life will continue? How much money is it worth? What is the value of this red shank? So let's go to the end, or perhaps the beginning of what happened actually genuinely with the funding and recognition of the prize. There's kind of a loop back to the UK. before I go to the use of your funds over the last year that the prize has done. When this immense recognition of the work that Snowchange and all these communities are doing was given to us a year ago, we were in the middle of applying to the Cambridge Conservation Initiative for the Endangered Landscapes Programme to start to expand our work with the peatlands and forests. And as you may know, it's very similar to this one. You have 3 stages or a couple of stages. There's 1 million applicants, and then you get to a 3rd stage, and then you try to defend your position, and you inform about the Ghostbusters trace gas analyzer and try to make the case that you are really special. And in the middle of us applying for a big grant, the news came that you awarded Snowchange this prize. And we can't say that ELP or the people in Cambridge were making decisions only based on that, but certainly boosted our work. So thank you. It led to $1.5 million grant to expand our work on peatlands and forests. So you can see the power of the recognition, also in financial terms. We have to be aware of those things because none of this works if we don't have enough resources to tackle the challenges up in the north. So thank you. That was a good side of the prize as well. But we wanted this to matter, and I was exchanging at Yule time with the principal, and we were learning about each other's work and scientific work, and then I was telling her that actually, do you know that one of your authors, J.R.R. Tolkien, was collecting some of the storylines from our villages for his, what's the book called? The Hobbit or something, Lord of the Rings. And we kind of discovered through those letters that there's a strong connection between Scotland, the UK, and Finland, also on culture and the arts and literature and so on. Again, in these hard times, we need more unity, more understanding and listening than ever before. And from that grew an idea that we want to fix the prize and the award on the landscape. I then turned to my colleague, Vladimir Feodorov, who is a Sami elder, indigenous elder. He has just killed a grayling that we will be frying for dinner a couple of years ago. So that's why he's smiling. And he's also bringing greetings to you. And I was asking Vladimir and some of his family, I'll get to that in the end. So, you know, we got this really big thing from the UK and Scotland. And you noticed how carefully I said that, the UK and Scotland. He said, well, why don't we try to remember it also on the landscape? So we then traveled to this river. This is River Näätämö, one of the remaining pristine Arctic rivers in Finland. It is still without any hydro stations. It is relatively in pristine condition. Some of the catchment has been cut or clear cut over the years, but for today's world, there's no more pristine environment on the planet except perhaps Antarctica. And we traveled on the river. We discussed. And he was explaining about the reindeer. This is Rudolph, of course, as you have learned. Don't tell the people online or anybody that Rudolph gets to be eaten in December. So despite his red nose here, he will be meat, but we don't talk about that in public. I'm sure all of you can keep a secret. What the likes of Rudolph and the other reindeer who are central to Sami indigenous culture and way of life, as in addition to their economy, depend on is healthy natural forests. The trouble is that those same forests, as I have told you, are the subject of climate change in the Arctic. They have been extracted so that only 4% remains, and lots of the mining companies are looking at the same exact habitats for their electric vehicle batteries, nickel batteries, and so on and so on. So things are not too great for Rudolf. And then we were contemplating with Vladimir what to do. And we came up with this. So, principal Mapstone, this is your forest, and the award forest. This is in Partakko, and it's fully pristine, 30 hectares of primary forest in the high Arctic that has never been clear cut. And it will continue to stay that way because the funding from your prize was used almost to the cent to purchase this for our Landscape Rewilding Programme. And following the guidance that Snowchange does, which is always the mandate from the village, the people, the Sami people in this case, decided, Osmo Seurujärvi, Vladimir and Pauliina, that this will be the physical memory in their world, and of course in Finland, for this immense recognition that you gave us, which is of course massively important symbol of hope. And you should know that some of the trees are 600 years old on this site. So we are still back to the Pictish times, almost, or at least your high kings and everything that's going on here in Scotland, when those first seeds came sprouted and it became a living natural forest that's almost extinct also in Finland, much like your Caledonian forests. We are keenly aware of the large-scale attempts for Scotland to rewild, to restore, to do good things with your peatlands. Our message to you is that it has to happen with the people. It can't be, even on this route, even with those good intentions, it can't be a top-down exercise. It has to come from the people that are there and with their consent and with their knowledges, because they are the primary people on the landscape well after all the projects are gone and things are coming back. And that's one of the central things we need to do in a new century of conservation and restoration, which is no longer the model of top-down fortress conservation, somebody setting up a national park in Yellowstone and kicking out the Blackfeet that have been, and Shoshone, that have been taking care of those mountains and plains for centuries, or Serengeti, Masai Mara, and the Maasai people there being kicked out, as they are doing now in Loliondo in Tanzania, in the name of conservation or reserves. So the thing that I'm trying to tell you, this extremely important hour for humanity, is that the planet is changing. The Arctic will become something completely different in our lifetimes. We are faced, those of us who are living there, with profound questions. How do we respond in time and in new ways? And I hope that this is the best we can give you, the memory on the landscape of your award. And all of you are, of course, invited now to come and witness that place. I will end by 2 points. Your forest is located currently where the number 3,776 square kilometers and the little pointer is at the moment. It's called Partakko, and that's the exact location of your forest in case somebody is taking a digital photo. Unfortunately, currently your forest is not yet up to 3,700 square kilometers. However, the point that's to do with this map is that it's one of the primary pilot sites on an ecological corridor that we are trying to establish following the model that your resources provided to us. We call it from the North Pole to the Arctic Sea. And roughly, This corridor that you are seeing on the map consists of the last remaining primary forests in the Sami area that we are still able to save, keep carbon on the ground, keep associated peatlands functioning, and secure Sami rights, indigenous heritage, and good life for Rudolph to be eaten later by us. I have been telling you a lot of things from the viewpoint of being a man that leads Snowchange. I get to meet with Obama's administration. I'm part of the Climate Crisis Advisory Group here with Sir David King. There are 14 of us. We meet with your media every month, actually next Thursday, to discuss the climate efforts. Most of us are men. The new century requires also something profoundly significant to correct the mistakes and misuse of power by men, by us. The other strategic mind in the way the award has been and the funding associated with the award from last year is by Pauliina Ferrarov, a Sami indigenous woman and leader. You will see in this picture how she's enjoying your forest or the forest that you enabled for them to remember this prize and this significant turn in the Sami history. She's smiling, of course. Pauliina unfortunately couldn't join our delegation, but she sends profound thanks to St. Andrews University and everybody associated with the prize. In April, she was able to start her work at the Venice Biennale, the highest art forum in the world, to my knowledge, at least in Europe. She was one of the 3 indigenous artists from the Sami area chosen for this year's Nordic Pavilion that Norway chose to rename as Sami Pavilion for this year. And in that work, there was 2 other artists, one from Norway and one from Sweden. Pauliina chose as her main message through her art and work the example of your forest, the preservation of these North Boreal forests as a mechanism to realize indigenous rights, undo centuries of colonial rule, safeguard those that are most in harm's way in the Arctic against climate change, and first and foremost, empower them to narrate new futures, new possibilities in ways that are completely now achievable if everything goes well. What does this ultimately represent to Snowchange can be summarized in one last thing. I have given you the view of Finland, our linguistic brothers and sisters all across the Eurasian North, I guess you can say. But we cannot shy away from the fact that not all Finns are like Kaisu, that work with Sami humbly. They lead the co-creation of science, they recognize the peatlands and protect the forests. Finns, who are the majority people in our country, like us and the Sami, despite our linguistic connection, have had a history of conflict, like many indigenous peoples and the large society around the world. And it's not been easy, despite the fact that we have strived to do better, we have worked with them and created completely new solutions to the Arctic case. Ultimately, what we are trying to do with Pauliina, Vladimir, and the Sami is a peace process. I came to this forest in May with Pauliina, and we were talking about the fact that how could the new look like? We know that the Finnish government will fail again in ratifying Sami rights this year. We know that most of the Finnish science institutions will continue to fail to recognize anything I have given you today, indigenous knowledge, memory of the landscapes and the oral histories and so on. But it doesn't matter if we are able to join hands on practical level to do the new. And that's why we are standing with you, in front of you with Kaisu and the work and Pauliina in peace. That is the message that the prize has given. It has enabled completely new steps between peoples, between communities, and an end to conflict, if nothing else, on these 30 hectares. And it's a big symbol in a world of war, world of scarcity, and world of mistakes. Gandhi told us in his wisdom that your enemies first will laugh at you, then they will fight you, and then you win. This is the message from the boreal forests and peatlands on how much the prize matters on peace. Thank you.
So that was extraordinary. I'm sure everyone agrees. You know, when we heard you present last time, you really moved us. That's why you won. And once again, I think we are thoroughly moved. That was extraordinary. I think, you know, we want to thank you. I think we should start by thanking you for the work that you and Kaisu, Pauliina are doing to preserve and to promote the embodied memory, this beautiful phrase, that's stewarded by our Indigenous communities. And you've come here to give voice to the peatlands and the forests, and you have done that so powerfully, there is no question. I also felt it was very moving that you reminded us that we need to bring humanity and respect to the process of rewilding and conservation. The fact that the forest that is being protected in honour of the St Andrews Prize is something really mind-blowing and I think enormously special. And I was particularly touched by the fact that actually some of the trees that you referred to are about the same age as a university.
Quite fitting.
And then the last thing I wanted to say is really that I have never thought about the march towards a more sustainable way of living as being a peace process. And I don't think I will ever forget that. Can we once again thank Tero, and Kaisu, please stand up here as well.
Yeah.
Not to run away just yet, Tero.
Okay.
There is a very important final step, which is to present you with the award that we were not able to do in person last year. So I would like you all to applaud wildly as I hand over.
Very wild.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go and stand over there to help the photographer. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Gosh, that was quite special. I must now concentrate and maybe stop with it. I pay attention to what's going to happen next, because we have, of course, reached the culmination of the 2022 cycle. I think we can all agree that Tero and Kaisu, you and your colleagues have set a very, very high bar for what a winning team looks like. And I know that many, if not all of you, have had the chance to see and hear for yourself the quality of finalists that the judges have been considering this year. I am delighted to say that the judges have had to work extremely hard. We're all still talking to each other. There are no bruises, but trust me, we had a very, very rigorous debate this year. I'm not just saying that. I would like to say what a privilege it was actually that this year we had such a high quality set of applicants and finalists for the award. And I would really like to thank the screening committee who do so much of the hard work to make sure that we end up with a fantastic winner. And I'd particularly like to thank Professor Anne McGurran for her excellent leadership, and to thank all of the screening committee for supporting this process so well, and also to thank my wonderful colleagues on the judging panel who make my job positively joyous. Can we give them all a round of applause? So on behalf of all the judges, I really do congratulate every single one of our finalists. You are all excellent, and we commend you all on the really important work that you are doing. I say this, I said this earlier in the process, I will say it again, I make no apology. We never fail to be uplifted by the passion, the commitment, the creativity of the change makers that we get to meet through this process. This year has been absolutely no exception, but as there has to be, there was one project that stood out for us as judges, for its potential to have a much wider reach beyond its current boundaries, to scale, to be replicated, to inspire, and in the process to deliver really significant environmental impact. That project, our winner for 2022, is Mission Tiburon. Just 1 second. While you're getting yourselves together, I just want to say a few words. Please come to the side, both of you. Please come, and we'll do the presentation in just a second. But I wanted to say a few words about why the judges felt that Mission Tiburon is such a worthy winner for the prize. I think we heard it in Tara's presentation, how fundamentally significant marine health is for all of our health, our planetary health, societal health. But it's often neglected. We don't visualize, we don't see what's happening in our oceans in the way that we might do in the land around us. And so we felt that what you were doing was really important. Your focus on coastal restoration. We loved the way that you made so many connections. You made a connection between marine and terrestrial conservation. You made a connection between shark conservation and mangrove conservation. You made a connection between science and people and communities and policymakers, all of which are necessary for us to achieve our objectives in conservation. You made connections with blue carbon, and you made connections with the empowerment of women and marginalised people. We also thought that it was very important that you found this particular niche focusing on nurseries. You talked about how this was almost a breakthrough moment for you to realise that by working with juveniles, you could have a disproportionate impact on shark populations in the long term. And all of these impressed us greatly. And in making this award, what we really hope is that the platform that the prize provides means that this can provide an exemplar, a source of inspiration, a template, if you like, for how iconic and charismatic creatures can be used to draw attention, to provide the right kind of lightning rod to help us be more effective, to be more passionate, to be more committed to conserving and protecting marine life and health. So for all those reasons, we're delighted to award this to you. Please, it's time to collect your winning medal and certificate.
Thank you so much. It's very unexpected for us. We are very excited. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. And really, I represent a lot of people that has been working with Misión Tiburón, a lot of people commitment that work each day with passion and that they believe in the conservation of sharks and in conservation of our ocean. And I would like to thank you, the panel, because we are at the ocean decade. So thank you for recognize this, for recognize the momentum, because we need to connect people to the ocean, because with the ocean, we will find the solution to fight the climate crisis. So thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much.
So well done again to Andres and Elena, who of course received a $100,000 prize. But I'd also like to take a moment now to congratulate our superb runners-up. Sorry, there's some serious meet and greeting going on here. We want to make sure that you also hear that we commend you for your progress. We really enjoyed hearing about your projects, and we look forward to those projects going from strength to strength. Please come to the front and collect your certificate, and of course you also each receive $25,000 in prize money. So Avani, would you like to come first, please? If I could now invite Jonathan and Erica from Health and Harmony as well, please. Excellent. So I think that this now brings our formal proceedings to a close. Thank you to those of you who've joined us online. I hope you've enjoyed the event as much as we have in the room here. So thank you all again very much indeed, and congratulations once more to our winners and our finalists.